G'day, everybody. Alibar Jones here. Good to see you all. I woke up this morning with some pretty bad news, and that was that Russia is conscripting troops, like they're preparing for a war, and so are some of their little buddies like Lithuania and Latvia and other, well, let's call them inconsequential countries. But it's it sounds like words going around that there's a war about to start. Now, let's not misunderstand how the Illuminati uses war. Let's not misunderstand its purpose. And that is when their lies become too thick, when it looks like they're going to get in genuine trouble, it's time to start a war. You saw the Ukraine war kick off because that week Anthony Fauci was due in court for the things he said about the great health crisis of 2020. You saw the Monica Lewinsky trial not happen. Why? Well, because the day before it was due to start, Bill Clinton decided to pick a fight with Iraq. And it was a 3-month bombing run. I don't think any troops went in. It was just enough to create a media blackout of the Monica Lewinsky issue. So he never saw the inside of a courtroom on that. You'll also recall that the war in Afghanistan, which began as a false flag event around the World Trade Center. 3 buildings dropped that day from 2 planes. Weird thing. But what you may not recall, which is kind of the point, is the day before Donald Rumsfeld had to explain to Congress how the military had lost $2.3 trillion in $2,000, which was an epic amount of money. And so rather than have to explain that, they decided to blow up some of their own buildings and begin a war on the opium-producing nation of Afghanistan. So what does a war like this look like? What is the point of a war like this? Because I think the Illuminati are boxed in. I think they're really very close to being trapped and executed, arrested, or what have you. I also heard that Klaus Schwab has gone into hospital, gone into hiding, disappeared, been arrested, whatever. Who knows what story. When they tell a story, who the hell knows what they're covering up? Because, these guys can't even spit straight, let alone tell you the straight story. And if you are not sure about the mainstream media covering the behinds of these political bellends, then you may or may not be aware that Paris is currently under siege from its own farmers, taxi and truck drivers. All of the roads in and out of Paris city are blocked, but not a word of it on mainstream media. Absolute silence. Anyway, I'm getting to the point, I promise you, that for the Illuminati, war is not about good guys and bad guys. Nowadays, it's just about creating the media blackout to cover their actions there, to prevent them from getting arrested. So what were we looking for when we decided to fly against this? If Russia's conscripting troops is preparing for a much larger offensive in the Ukraine, and I deeply suspect Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe in general. So we looked for who is the Illuminati sacrificing to at the moment? Who's receiving all of this energy that they require to kick off a world war? And I will start by saying we found a deity that was receiving a lot of loosh. It was all being focused in there. It seems to have been a lot of ceremony to support it. This god had hundreds of different names depending on which culture you come from, but all of them basically translate to the god of war, something like that. The good news was that it had not collected 50% of the loosh required to kick off a world war. It didn't have enough fuel to create that spark. There wasn't enough in the circuit to spark off a world war, which is wonderful news, and we'll keep our eye on that because I think we all have an interest in that never happening. So what did we do with the God of War? Well, we did what we did to Yaldabaoth, but 9 or 12 months ago, I think. We created a seven-dimensional mirror prison. So like a hall of mirrors that's 7 dimensions and constantly in motion. So it's constantly moving and reforming itself. And we put the god of war in that. It's a prison he'll never, ever, ever escape. We did this to Yaldabaoth, who is a particularly tenacious and vicious little character. But nobody's seen him since we did that 9 months ago. So we think this is effective, and ideally, what this means is war will be much, much, much more difficult to produce. And I say that because it's actually not a natural part of human culture to be at war, because basically we're smarter than that. We don't need to fight to resolve disputes. There is more than one way to do it. In fact, it's really rather childish to say to a group of people, do what we want, or we'll blow you up, or we'll kill all of you. It's like such a childish and demanding way to be in the world, but it seems to have become quite popular. So we don't expect to see that deity again. But what was interesting was his connections. You see, he was actually connected to the Kaaba. And a lot of other religious groups who see themselves at war or use religion or the difference in religion as a context for war. So the God of War was connected into a lot of that, deeply into hell. In fact, as we cleared through everything that war touched, and not just the anger and the hatred and the rivalry and the aggression and the masculinity, but also the victims. So things like all the pain and suffering and victimhood that comes to the civilian population is also harvested by the God of War. And as we went through and methodically captured all of the soul shards that had been captured there, so liberated, I think is the word we're going to use, recaptured those and shut down the dimensions that the God of War was using, it actually accounted for about 15% of the real estate in hell. So I think we struck a really big blow. And there is a point at which hell just might split into 2 pieces because it seems like war was so critical to the structure of hell. We also managed to clear a lot of the pain from future wars, and they were uglier and uglier the further we stepped forward in time, not surprisingly. There was a deep, deep connection to Mars, or the planet Mars, not necessarily the Roman god Mars. And even less surprisingly, finance. You see, finance thrives on war because of all the generated demand, and juicy, juicy contracts. Now, I shudder to think just how much Halliburton sucked out of the US government for its services in Iraq. It just seems really painful, but they did what they needed to do, apparently. But war support services is a massive industry. And so finance has a lot to gain from destruction, which for me is counterintuitive. Like, nobody should be making money out of destruction. If there was no money in it, who'd want to play it? Who'd want to play that game? But what was really interesting was the next part, which I think we found the fingerprints of war. You see, like I said, war is not a natural human emotion. It's not a natural development. This sort of rivalry that leads to mass killing doesn't work for me, it doesn't make sense. And what we found is that the concept of war is an imported idea, and it's imported to our solar system. And what's really messed up is that the corpse of Marduk, a yellow planet, which is now an asteroid belt after it was detonated, and the absolute emaciation and desertification of Mars as a result of war, leaves us with fingerprints of destruction. And this particular force, this intergalactic force of war, this also had its claws in Earth. And if you look at human history, it's just a list of wars almost, and a list of territory changes because of it. I would like to think that the eradication of war was that simple, but I think the concept's still floating around. But it seems the current timeline for war is all but evaporated. Like we're down to a 4% chance that World War III will kick off. And our team will keep pushing that if that number rises at all, if events lead forward in that direction. What I'm hoping is that the French not dictator Macron will actually be arrested or removed from power. And that will dissuade Western countries from engaging with Russia in the way that they have. And our team might actually do something to start pulling apart the protection that Macron seems to know and love. Yeah, and on a daily basis, just between you and me, I'm so glad I don't have to live in these guys' heads. Like the things that are going on in there, the way they think, what they think about, the actions they take. Ooh, I can't empathize. I cannot see how people can think this way. That I've I've lied and cheated so much, and now that I'm really close to being found out, I'm going to make all of them kill each other because that'll take the focus off me and I'll get away with it. Doesn't matter that millions will die, or maybe even a billion people will die over the course of years, and it'll create untold misery and destruction. But I won't get in trouble, so don't matter too much. How do you think? How the hell do you think like that? I don't get it. And perhaps it is inhuman. I just want you guys to absorb that concept that the thought process that our world leaders have might just be inhuman. All right. Love to you all. Stay well. May the force be with you, and bye for now.